Welcome to the Miller Report. Today's guests, everybody is familiar with. We have our world's greatest guardian angel, Curtis Sliwa, and apparently the new black belt and like Columbo of New York, David Paterson, who seems to have studied karate in his past life. So I had to have them back on because everything we read about says how New York is doing so well, crime is down. But here we are, 93rd and 2nd Avenue, and these guys see somebody up on a fire escape and ask him to come down just in good faith. And there goes, all hell breaks loose. So David, tell us what happened.
Well, it was actually 96th Street and 2nd Avenue, and my stepson, Anthony, was walking the dog, and he sees these guys climbing on the building. And actually, he did not start off being confrontational. He was trying to tell them they're going to fall down because they were climbing up, not the fire escape, but the bricks on the building. And so, when they came down, they told him what he could do with himself. And he got into a little bit with one of them, and that was the end of it. And then I'd say about 15 minutes later, he and I were coming down to do something else. And we turned the corner and we run smack into this group. But this time there are like 9 of them. And Anthony's challenging.
What age would you say?
I'd say 13 to 15, that age. And Anthony's kind of challenging them. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well. But inevitably, this fight started, and what actually was an argument. But what killed me is that this woman, who I now know is 34 years old, comes into the fight and starts screaming at Anthony. She doesn't say anything to the other kids. So I'm thinking, well,
screaming
maybe,
what?
What are you doing? Why are you causing all this trouble? All this kind of stuff. He says, I wasn't causing trouble. I was trying to stop the trouble. And so at first, Curtis, I thought she might have been a relative of theirs, but she wasn't. She's just like this woman with purple hair who was walking down the street. And I mean purple hair. If I can see it's purple, everyone knows it's purple hair.
So it made you see.
So then she's doing all this, carrying on. And next thing you know, this guy comes in and he's trying to restrain Anthony, and so I kind of get into it with him, and then there was this. So I get pushed out of the center of it, and I'm trying to get back in, and there's this kid who I guess he's about 12 or 13, but he's like Fat Albert in Bill Cosby land, and so he starts pushing me. So I smashed him into the wall by the McDonald's.
What do you mean you smashed him? First of all, it's true you don't see. You got a 13-year-old, big guy, kids around you. Where did this strength come from?
Character.
Well, do you have martial arts training?
No, I have no martial arts training, but, just
adrenaline.
Fighting with people over the years, because I hadn't had a fight in a long time. And, so I pushed him into the glass at the McDonald's, and I couldn't believe how he just fell out like that. And so I run back into the fray, but by now, these kids are... Anthony's on the ground because, when you're one person fighting 6 people, that's where it's going to wind up unless you have some help. And they are just like torturing him. So I get into it with them, and then, finally it kind of dissipates. But up until a few days ago, I just felt like there was a time in the fight that I don't remember. Like for some reason, I don't remember it. On the video that you all saw, what you don't see is this guy who was, I guess, with the woman, runs up behind me, winds up, and hits me as hard as he could. And I guess I was knocked unconscious for a little period of time. And then he walks away. Now, he's the one who's being charged in this case, and he has some other priors. So I'll forget him long before he forgets me.
I want to get onto that, but I read that one of the people that's been arrested is a New York Housing Authority employee.
That's him.
NYCHA. Is that true?
That's him. And the woman was an employee, too.
What does that say about who's running the city and NYCHA?
Well, it's a good thing they aren't.
Exactly.
But Curtis, you know how in these situations, you can kind of read how far you can go and that kind of thing. I never would have thought this situation would get that out of hand. It was really when I was talking to the kids and telling them, look, it's not about what you all are doing. It's that you keep fooling around climbing up on these buildings. One of you is going to fall. And then all of a sudden, these adults get involved. They don't even know what's going on. And they're the ones that brought it to fruition the way it was.
Well, you know something. Anthony described exactly what Governor David Paterson described, that he told the kids to get down from there or I'm going to call the cops. Now that he's recovered, I got to explain to him.
What are the cops going to do?
You did the right thing, but when you say I'm going to call the police, some folks in the streets say, oh, snitches get stitches and end up in ditches.
Right.
So now they're not only angry at you because you interrupted, quote, their fun, whatever that was, climbing up the side of a building, but you said you were going to snitch them out. So even though they didn't have a fight at that location, that's parked in their head. So I'm sure when they saw an hour later Governor Paterson and Anthony coming around and going to the McDonald's and they were hanging out there, they probably said to the adults, yeah, this guy's the snitch. Said he was going to snitch us out to the police. And that caused them to be 9-on-2. Now, all of a sudden, it wasn't just teenagers. As Anthony said to me the next day when I spoke to him, he said, Dad, what was I supposed to do? This woman, who David described with the purple hair, 34, night worker, punched him in the face. And I've always taught him and the other guardian angels, you don't hit a woman. Do everything you can to avoid. So he's frozen there. He's a capable martial artist. But it's the woman who strikes. And then as David described, the 40-year-old other night shift employee, the male, rabbit punches him right in the back. He doesn't even remember it because obviously you hit somebody from behind, they could go straight down. You could have been killed. My son, when you look at the vicious beating, I don't think people realize it. There were two things that stood out to me because I've been in many street fights, many times in the same position. The 34-year-old woman is holding Anthony's arms away from his body.
Wow.
While he's on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
While the teenagers and adults are putting boots into him, including his head. Any one of those kicks could have killed him. And then Batman here, David Paterson, is jumping right in and throwing these guys around. I took judo before I took karate. He was using classic judo moves you probably don't know from the days of Jiu-Jitsu and Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
He was using osotogari. These guys were flying in the air.
You know what, Curtis? You've always been an advocate for safety. Nobody speaks more about safety. I mean, if you think about safety, you think about Curtis. You're on the subways, you're out there, you're in the streets. What does this say about our city?
These random attacks.
Yeah.
You know, we have a new phrase. Random attacks. We never really had them before. You'd have a lot of attacks, but you could pretty much.
But it was like an argument, and then it erupted into a fight.
You could pretty much figure out, hey, that's a bad group of people over there. I need to avoid them. Now you could be minding your own business, like David and Anthony were going to a McDonald's, and get jumped by a gang of 9
on the Upper East Side.
Mostly adults who are just hanging out. I'm sure they worked that day. Of all places to hang out outside of a Mickey D's. I know I was a night manager at Mickey D's. And
right.
David, I would go outside and said, I give you 5 minutes to leave. If I come back out here, your kneecaps are going to be singing and ringing. Nowadays, they tell managers, assistant managers, security, leave them alone, let them hang out. Anybody hanging out after a period of time is going to get into trouble. Nothing good comes from hanging out.
Right.
Governor, do you think that Braggs is going to prosecute these kids?
They are trying to prosecute them now. I can't speak about some of it because I have already testified in the grand jury, but I do get the impression that they're giving a lot of attention to this case.
Because if you guys don't get some law and order here, who's going to? How about a regular citizen?
I was going to send you and Curtis over there to deal with those kids.
But pictures came out right away. Mm-hmm. The video came out. The cops immediately made arrests. As David described, the parents immediately brought the teenagers in. arrested 2. They're going to family court. 1 was cut loose. And it's true. I looked at the kid. He didn't do any physical assaulting. He was just screaming. But they'll go to family court. The adults will go through normal criminal court, and we'll see the outcome.
So you said some of it was taken right away on camera. Do you think the cameras helped, and do we need more cameras?
Well, the cameras definitely covered pretty much the whole situation. And that's very helpful because the police basically had rounded up the people involved by noon the next day. By the way, Curtis, I thought the reason they didn't charge the 3rd kid is he's the one I punched in the jaw.
So if you
Now,
don't...
in terms of the video, I had possession of the video early. I did not release it. I didn't want to cause trauma to his mother, Mary, and others.
Right.
But then I'm reading in the Daily News that the 2 adults go in with their legal aid attorneys, and they're blaming Governor Paterson, and they're claiming Anthony's a black belt. They were the peacemakers. They actually deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's when I said, no, we have to release this so that people can see these guys were the ones that were being attacked. David Paterson saved my son's life, and Anthony was fighting for his life, and they were relentless. They just kept pounding away at him.
How are you doing now, David?
You know, the funny thing is, with the exception of the being hit in the back of the head, which I didn't even know about, I didn't have any injuries from that.
Rocky. We got a new name.
Exactly.
Rocky.
We have to play the Rocky theme.
The old
We
phrase
do. Let's get it going.
from Muhammad Ali, hit and not be hit.
Exactly. But I'm in the Black Belt Hall of Fame, although I never earned a black belt. It's just a lot of street fights. I observed Governor David Paterson. There's a lot of different routes he could have used. Most people would have backed off and just yelled at the crowd. He plunged right in, which meant he could have been killed.
Yeah.
You understand that? This group was now out of control. This is what happened.
9 on 2.
Right. This is what happens. It's frenzy. They're like, it's a frenzy. 2 of them alone, no. 9 of them, though.
How long till the police came?
I think it's relatively quick, right?
Relatively quick, but after I got up from, getting punched in the back of the head.
Sucker
punched. I didn't even think to call 911 until I got back home. But from the time we called them, they were there very quickly.
So, Curtis, I want to take this to politics for a minute because we know that you're running and we know that the city needs some help.
Yeah, this guy's running too, I hear.
Maybe we'll get into that. But I want to talk to you about it.
It should be me versus David Paterson.
Well, let's bring them all in. Where's John? Where's Andrew? Where's Stringer?
2 former partners swearing off. In other words, this would really...
You don't know. We
there'd be
were
a lot of history
partners
between the 2 of us.
Okay, well, this is becoming... Apparently, Curtis, you're partners with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm finding out about a lot of ex-wives and ex-kids. And like they're
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
You've got quite the history. But back to politics.
Okay.
We know everybody agrees we have to have more police.
Yes.
When you run, if you win, other than putting more police on the street, which is obvious, what else do you think you could do? What are some concrete things you think you could do to make our city safe again?
Well, I think it all starts with more police. You have 32,500. You need at least 38,000. The men and women are working forced overtime. Some of them 6, 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. They're not going to be at their peak efficiency. If cops want to work overtime and there's overtime available, they should be able to do it. But almost everyone, I could see they're dragging. It makes them angry, makes them almost not wanting to be as good as they can be. I thought Eric Adams made a major mistake initially. He didn't put back $1 billion into the budget that de Blasio took out. That would have been a fight with the city council, but it should have been a fight. And then we ended up giving it all to the migrant.
They don't get any justification? They can't put people in jail?
Well, because
they're getting shot at? So how do you fix the morale?
As Curtis is pointing out, that the lack of support from other agencies and even from the elected officials who don't want to be appearing to be sticking up for the police is driving the situation out of control. And really, what is important, I think, is that elected officials, I mean, if you have a progressive point of view about this or that, that's one thing. But these types of crimes that we're talking about today and the situation going on in the city right now, people don't want to go outside.
And it's a double standard. I remember years ago, a friend of mine who had been a cop at the 69th Precinct used to look on my mom and dad as they were getting older. You stopped by the house. It was James Davis, who became a city councilman. And one day in city council chambers, a constituent of his pulled out a gun and killed him in front of the other council members. A police officer pulled his revolver out and took out that constituent. All the city council people were crying. They were hiding. From then on, armed police officers were there. That's why you have metal detectors outside now. You got to go through the shack. That's what average, everyday people want. But see, the city council now hates cops, but they want cops to protect them. You say to yourself, what a double standard. Like we have Jumaane Williams, who could conceivably replace Eric Adams.
But just for 90 days, correct?
Right. But the point is, he does not support police, yet he gets escorted to and from Fort Hamilton, where he lives, the safest place in New York, by police officers.
And he was injured in an incident, wasn't he?
Yes.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, so the point is, you can't have it where you're protected by cops, and then all of a sudden you don't want citizens to be protected.
Do you think the city's ready for a Republican mayor, David?
I don't think the votes are there, but I think one of the things that some of the Republican candidates have done is to push the argument into a better place than it's been before. We'd have all these Democrats running against each other, and it's like who can be nicer to outlaws than the other person. And that's why the candidacies from other parties other than the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat, but
you're centrist.
They're good.
You're a common sense Democrat, as John likes to call it.
Well, my party, the Republicans, is only one out of every 8 who is a Republican. Double the number of Republicans are people who identify as independents. And then the mass majority are Democrats. Some of them are Democratic Socialists, liberals, progressive, moderate Democrats. So there's such a minimal number of Democrats, 8% of the total electorate. You can't get elected just with Republican votes. It's different than it was with Bloomberg. There were more Republicans, more when Giuliani was there. The route to victory for a Republican, if they hope to beat a Democrat, is with moderate Democrats and independents, without which you can't win. You can't win.
So, Curtis, you're a little controversial. You speak your mind. You are so smart and educated. People like you or they don't like you. There's very little gray with you. David, people love you. Anybody you talk to, you're just well liked. I mean, even our friend asked to meet with you, our mutual friend. So many people want to sit down with you because you see both sides so well. So I want to ask you, who's in the ring?
I don't see any sides too well.
So who's in the ring? We got Curtis. We got Scott Stringer. We got maybe Cuomo. We've got maybe John Katz. I could go on. We've got. Are you running? Are you a possibility, David?
Well, me?
Yeah.
No, I like commenting.
Okay.
Commentating.
Right. So
at
we're going to
this
keep
point.
No,
you.
his name is being bandied about. Don't kid yourself. Fred Lander, the controller, wants to run. Jumaane Williams. Almost everybody wants to run. And you see, if there's a nonpartisan election, think back 25 years ago. Schwarzenegger became governor because Gray Davis was out in a recall election. He couldn't get 50%, so it went to 135 different candidates.
Wow.
Ran in that election, yeah.
That's right. Including, who was that guy from Different Strokes?
Yes.
He finished second.
I'm going to put you on the spot, David, because I know you can't pick and you got Curtis next to you. So we're not going to say a name, but I'm going to ask you about a quality because people do want to hear from you and they're listening. What qualities do you think the next mayor should have that could really unite our city so that we could move on and have New York will have its cachet back and that people will want to be here?
I think the ability to allow the public to reach out In other words, there are a lot of mayors, they have these big press conferences, they have these weekly briefings and that kind of thing. But I think they're insulating themselves. So it's the mayor who's willing to go to the different places in the city that perhaps previous mayors didn't, who thinks about all the citizens of the city as opposed to the ones who are lining their coffers. I think that would be a pleasant change. In a sense, the way John Lindsay started many years ago. Now, he didn't end that way, but when he first started out, it was kind of refreshing. He'd walk around the streets and the media would come with him and he'd shake hands with people.
Like Koch.
Well, Koch did it too, and he was certainly very outgoing. He I think was actually two different mayors, from when he first started, and then when he was spared after it looked like he was going to be out.
I think you need honesty. Nobody, even regular voters, believe that politicians are honest anymore. They think they put their beak in the trough. Okay, Curtis, now you're a politician. You're a crook just like the rest of them. But maybe you'll take less. That's what they say. Maybe you'll take less than the last guy. So they become so jaded and skeptical. Look, Koch's last 4 years mired in corruption. We see Eric Adams, the allegations, corruption. Bill de Blasio almost was charged by Preet Bharara for corruption. He escaped just barely. So there is the perception that no matter who you are, if you're in politics, you're getting wine, dine, and pocket line. And for my fellow Republicans, I tell them, hey, you got to scrape the barnacles off your backside and go into neighborhoods where the only Republican they've ever seen is Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill. And they're afraid to do that. If you're afraid to go into the community, they're not going to vote for you.
What are you going to do?
So, Curtis, if you don't mind, Suzanne, next to all these other guys, my Yankees tickets are looking pretty good.
How about the Mets?
They try to put you in jail.
I know.
When you went to the World
Yankees
Series
ticket.
against the Phillies. Could you believe this? He's the governor of the state. Now, Rendell, who was the governor of Pennsylvania,
was sitting right there.
he got free tickets, and they tried to jam up David Paterson.
No, David, you're our saint. So, Curtis, other than more police, what are you going to do to make this city better? Give us some other. So how are you going to keep businesses here? What are you going to do to keep this city thriving? Right now, it just really has lost its cachet. We have tourists that come here. We're filled, but it's not the kind of tourists we want. It's not the kind of spending we want. It's not the people that are coming here from Italy and they're shopping along Fifth Avenue that they're used to. It's young kids. They want to be in New York. They're stopping by, but they're not investing. You don't see foreigners investing here. You see these buildings on 57th Street dark. They may own, but it's dark. So if you're the mayor, how are you going to keep this thriving?
Well, what's the one thing that everybody sees right away? They go into a retail shop, many of them closing. Walgreens announced more closing. Dwayne Reed closing. CVS closing. Rite Aid almost no longer existence in New York City. Got to make it so that the shoplifters are not just going to keep going in and out with an easy pass. If you don't keep these retail establishments open, or they have to basically run their operation like Fort Knox, where you have to stand there waiting 20 minutes for some attendant to come out with a key to open up, what is basically a locked box in order for you to get a tube of toothpaste, the city can't recover. And nobody talks about this. The mayor admitted it. 90,000 packages a day destined for businesses and people get stolen by porch pirates. They call them porch pirates. So that means DHS, USPS, UPS, Amazon deliveries. 90,000 a day, not one arrest. So naturally, the quickest route to commit crime is to steal these packages, walk away, and there are no consequences. If you can deal with those two issues, people's faith will be restored that something's being done. If you only attack things at the top level, average people are never going to experience that.
How much leverage will you as mayor have?
By the time this city council gets through with emasculating the mayor and Governor Holcomb is now the shot caller, you may be what they have. They may need a city manager. In other cities, the mayor is a ribbon cutter and the city manager runs the business of the city. They are so muting the power of the mayoralty, especially Adrian Adams, who really is the shot caller now. Adrian Adams has more power as the Speaker of the City Council than Eric Adams has. And we have to fight for mayoral control. You know how many years it took to control what used to be the Board of Education and then now the Department of Education? Used to be a Board of Education, which absolutely just dysfunctional. And now they're threatening to take it back, because they have this veto-proof majority in the state Senate and the state assembly. They want to take it back. The mayor may well end up being a eunuch, a gelding, a capon by the time they get through with him.
Hopefully he's got some karate in his background. David, what about you? What do you think?
I think that one of the most important issues in this city, and Curtis and I used to talk about this when we did a radio show together, is that it's not just the educational system, but it's the timing of when we deliver education. So, for instance, it's well known that younger people really their brain doesn't click in until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and we have them going to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then we let them out at 3:30 in the afternoon, and without any programs for them to go to per se, or out any after-school activities for them, or athletic activities. Where are they going? Into the streets. And that's when most of the crime occurs, at those particular hours. And yet, we have never wanted to change our policies and the structure that is so immovable to accommodate the fact that we could keep the schools open, run the athletic programs out from there for the students that don't do well at those times. You can help them with after-school training, but most importantly, education itself really didn't start out teaching reading and writing.
Well, let me ask you a question.
It was stewardship. In other words, that the
Suzanne,
kids...
what schools did you go to in Canarsie?
I went to PS 115 and Builders C Junior High School.
So PS 115, I went to PS 114. We had after-school center. Mm-hmm. You then go home, have something to eat, and then you had night center.
Yeah.
It would keep you out of harm's way.
But nobody's
nobody's
talking about the bigger issue here. The bigger issue is, even if we want to do that, we have 200,000 migrants here. So who's going to support this? Who's going to support these kids to go to school? What do you do with these kids? They're kids. They come. They have testosterone. There's no money for them. So that's the bigger issue. We're just overflown with kids in these schools. How do you teach?
Yeah, that's a relatively new issue that we've had to address because the migrants got dumped on us some months ago. But I do think if we change not just how children are educated, but the time that they're educated, that it would help.
Also, you have a $36 billion budget for the Department of Education. That's 1/3 of the budget. The old Board of Education, which was down on Livingston Street, had nowhere near that kind of budget.
But the money goes not to the classrooms, it goes to the top.
In fact, individual teachers now have to go out of pocket in order to buy supplies. With a $36 billion budget, how is that conceivable or comprehensible? Because if you go to the Department of Education, which is in the old Tweed building right behind City Hall.
How appropriate.
Oh, my God, exactly, the corruption, is that it's all top-heavy with administrators. You don't know what they do.
So let's see, we want to reform the education department. We want to reform the police. We want to reform, what about the fire department? How are they doing?
Fire department, I don't see a problem.
How about the sanitation department? It's all the infrastructure. We're crumbling.
Sanitation?
Yeah.
What do we have there? Past the Great Pool Pond. Jeeves, can you pick up that piece of paper there? That's right. Is my stretch limo ready? Jessica Tisch? What the hell does she know about a sanitation? First of all, there's garbage in the streets. They cut back on the overtime. They want to do away with the rats. Well, guess what? Rats feed off the garbage. And now they're thinking of making this woman who looks like a little lost girl in a department store the police commissioner? Are you freaking out of your minds? Because her daddy's got the scarole and the moolah shmoolah. Come on.
David, who's running the city now?
Well, I think right now, because of the mayor's financial, his difficulties, the city is, in a sense, running itself.
Great.
Well, no, that's not bad. Let me explain. Comrade Bill de Blasio, the part-time mayor, the dope from Park Slope, went out like Don Quixote, remember, trying to run for president. He got bupkis, he got ugats, right, in terms of votes. He was away 4 months. The city never ran better under his 8 years when he was away. There's a permanent government, civil servants. They know how to run this city. That's why when you come in as mayor, leave well enough alone. You can make slight changes, but the city will run itself. These men and women, they've been doing this no matter who the mayor is. Most mayors don't even know what they do, but they make the city work.
Well, we have a lot of terrorist threats that are going on right now. Who's monitoring that?
Good question. If you have less police officers, which everyone acknowledges, there used to be 1,000 men and women assigned to the anti-terrorism task force. They used to work at the Bush Terminal Market right off the BQE, downtown Brooklyn. They've lost, they won't tell you how their ranks have been depleted, but they won't work with ICE. You don't work with ICE. ICE has the computer. They know everybody who is on the terrorist watch list. And we have been told, meaning the police department, you cannot plug in to that computer. I mean, how ridiculous is that? You have these Tajiks who are being stopped all the time. They are the number one terrorists in the world. They defied Putin. Remember, they went into that movie house. They blew away over 250 people and burnt it down. Those are Tajiks. They're right here on Coney Island Avenue in Borough Park. And they go back and forth like they own the place.
David, how risky do you think we are for an attack here?
I think there's a great risk based on what Curtis is actually saying is after September 11th, everybody was in a like lugubrious, mournful state for a few years. But then, it's in the past, and then it's more in the past. And when you're looking to cut corners, you start limiting the amount of effort that you're waging in that particular area. So the city after 2001 was probably very, very safe for those original 5 years. But since then, we'll be coming up on 20 years where we've just kind of acted like it never happened. And I'm not accusing anyone of not caring about our country. It's just that when it comes to where we spend certain parts of money, it's easier to go to other places than to keep the city safe and secure.
Well, on that note, guys, so Curtis, tell us you're running. You feeling confident about this?
I'm not like one of these. I might run, maybe the angle to the dangle. If Eric Adams runs, I won't run. I am running, whether it's a special election or the general election, period.
And what's the first thing on your agenda when you win?
Is get down on my hands and knees and say, oh, my God, I actually won this.
After that.
Now I got to run the city.
Day two. What's the first thing you're going to do?
Day two
what he should do
put together the brightest people in New York City who are more experienced than me, and they become the consiglieres. They will guide the ship, something Eric Adams never did. He surrounded himself with his cronies, all yes men and yes women. You need somebody to say no to you. That's stupid, Curtis. Apologize. No, that's the wrong thing to do. He's impervious to that kind of criticism.
David?
Well, when Curtis gets in, I better get a phone call. That's all I'm going to say.
You're going to be on his top list to help fix us.
Behind the tremendous sense of humor and the way he expresses himself, he really does care about the city. And I grew to understand that when we worked together for a period of time. And really, voices that are crying for change need to be heard right now because the political races, people make deals and they do this stuff, and it really doesn't change anything. If we're going to have the kind of change where we're going to revamp our law enforcement and our homeland security, we're going to need people who have paid a lot of attention to this over the past few years, not just somebody who got elected, to some position and now thinks for some reason that they should run for mayor.
Do you think that Eric Adams is going to finish his term and rerun, or you think he's going to, Hochul's going to get rid of him?
I think he intends to finish his term and run again, but all of this is, not particularly clear where his legal problems are going to take him. And if that's the case, then we're going to have to start, looking in a different direction. I think Eric Adams was well-meaning, but I think that there were just too many people in the administration and were coming from the same place, and there was nobody. And I think every major elected official, mayor or governor, should have needs a person who's watching their back. That's why you see these people look up years later. I didn't know this was going on. Yeah, maybe they didn't, but they should have.
Well, now you notice there are some benefits to him being indicted. He's not out at night anymore. He's not breaking to the 4 in the morning at some club. He's not surrounded by hip-hop guys. Notice, it's elderly black people, well-respected in the community as he tries to hold on. He has a press conference. It's himself. It's not an army of his commissioners behind him. And he doesn't play that stupid Jay-Z music as an introduction when he comes out.
Curtis, I got to defend him. I think he's done a good job, and I think that he's been dealt a really bad hand, and I think that he had to pick up a lot of bad stuff, and he's really done a pretty good job considering other Democratic cities of what's going on now. What's going to happen in the future? I think it's time for a Republican, and maybe we got to move on.
In Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Better than Philadelphia. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see. This is going to really amp up. And
I want him to enter the race.
Oh wait, David, is this fake news? Fake news. Where's John?
Listen,
get him down here.
If I enter the race and become the Democratic candidate and he's the Republican candidate, for the first time in history, we will have a negotiated settlement and we will run the city together.
What about, last question.
How about this? No. He'll be the AM mayor because he'll prefer that. And then I get to stalk the streets, not the clubs at night, looking for criminals in Gotham City. How about that?
Why don't you just get all the candidates to be part of your cabinet? That's what we should do.
Then we'll wind up where some people are right now.
So, David, I have one last question for you. What do you think about Andrew Cuomo? You think he's coming in?
I think he is looking to do something. I think that his real, and he and I have talked about this, I think his real desire would be to come back as governor. But it's just not clear what direction that he wants to go. But he's looking around.
Let me advise all these old timers, right, who live in a time warp. It ain't the city it used to be. The socialists rule the city council. They control whole neighborhoods. You go to a community meeting now, you can't do it from the Hamptons, Andrew Evilize Cuomo. You can't just go to a small black church.
He knows his way around. I think he's gonna be doing it right from New York.
He's been in the city in a month of Sundays. He's in the minority now in the Democratic Party. It's taken over by the socialists.
Well, let's wait and see.
You know, Suzanne, Curtis is one of his bigger fans. You should really see what he says when he's mad at him.
Can I give him a salute? Andrew, send him Tootsie, brilliant, spud cheap.
All right, we're gonna cut that. Cut. Thanks, guys. This is fun.